Hi, the topic under discussion today is the circulatory system. So we'll be discussing it under the following sections, and these are sections which are in fact whole subjects by themselves in the first 2 years of your medical school. So we'll start with the embryology, which talks about the formation of the system. The second section is the anatomy or the structure of the system. The third is the physiology, which deals with the organ functioning. And finally, we'll conclude with the pathology, which deals with improper function. Starting with the embryology, there are really only 2 points to take a note of for your exams. The first one being that the heart is mesodermally derived. The second is that the heart starts as a single heart tube and later develops into the complex structure that we will be discussing. Now, just to recollect, there are 3 germ layers from which the rest of the body develops from, and these are the ectoderm, the endoderm, and the mesoderm. And I think the easiest way that I remember that the heart is mesodermally derived is that almost all the structures which are in the center or the middle of the body are mesodermally derived. Moving on to the anatomy, it is important to first locate the heart in the body, and to do that I would like to define what is thorax. Thorax is the space between the neck and the diaphragm in the body where the heart and the lungs are located. The heart is further located in a space known as mediastinum, and just to picturize this, I have drawn here the 2 lungs. The space between these 2 lungs where the heart is located is known as mediastinum. Finally, this is a picture of the heart that I've included from my dissection table as a little piece of incentive. So just to run through the section, the heart is present in the thoracic cavity. It is present between the 2 lungs in a space known as mediastinum. It is slightly tilted to the left, and it is protected by pericardium, which encloses the pericardial fluid. Now moving to the anatomy of the heart. The heart is a 4-chambered structure, and I've drawn these chambers to visualize the heart. So at the top, the 2 atria are present, and these atria are smaller than the 2 ventricles which are present at the bottom. Now between the chambers, there are pieces of tissue which divide the heart into the chambers, and these are known as septa. And the names of these septa become very important for your exams. The first is the interatrial septa, which divides the atrium into the 2 atria. The second is the interventricular septa, which divides the ventricles into the right and the left ventricles. Finally, there is the atrioventricular septa on either side, which divides the right and the left half into the atrium and the ventricles. Now, one point to remember is that the interventricular septa is much thicker than the interatrial septa, and this is to withstand the high pressure in the ventricles. Now just to run through this text, the heart has 4 chambers, the 2 atria and the 2 ventricles. The size of the atria is smaller than the size of the ventricles. The septum present between the 2 atria is the interatrial septum, and between the 2 ventricles is the interventricular septum. The interventricular septum is thick-walled compared to the interatrial septum. And finally, the atrioventricular septum divides the right and the left halves into the atrium and the ventricles. The next section is on the valves which are present inside the heart. A valve is a structure in the heart which creates a unidirectional flow of blood through the chambers. Now the flow of blood will be dealt with in the next couple of sections, but just to give a picture, blood flows from the right atrium and into the right ventricle. The right ventricle blood flows into the pulmonary artery. Blood also flows on the left side from the left atrium to the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, blood is pumped out into the aorta. So the 4 valves which are present, and the names of these valves along with the location become very important for the exam. The first valve is known as the tricuspid valve, which is present between the right atrium and the right ventricle. And I think the easiest way that I like to remember is tri is present in the right region. The second is the bicuspid valve, which is present between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The last two valves are also known as semilunar valves, and these include the pulmonary and the aortic valve present over the regions. So just to summarize, there are two cuspid valves which include the tri and the bicuspid valves, and these valves are sometimes also referred to as the AV valves or the atrioventricular valves. And then there is the semilunar valves. So here is a diagram to represent the different valves of the heart. There is the tricuspid valve between the right atrium and the right ventricle, the pulmonary valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, the mitral or the bicuspid valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle, and finally the aortic valve between the left ventricle and the aorta. The final anatomical concept is that of the conducting system of the heart. Now the heart tissue has a special property whereby it can generate and conduct its signals for its functioning, and this property is known as autoexcitability. To simply put it, the heart does not need an external source like a nerve to initiate and generate the signals. Now there are some specialized areas which are better at this function, and the names of these areas become very important for the exams. So just to picturize this, there is a structure which is known as the sinoatrial node, which is present at the top of the right atrium. This sinoatrial node is very important for initiating the signaling process. The second structure is known as the atrioventricular node, which is present at the junction of the atrium and the ventricles. This transmits the signal from the atrium to the ventricles. The signal is then transmitted to a structure known as bundle of His, which then transmits the signals to bundle branches, and finally the Purkinje fibers, which run all along the ventricles. So this is a figure of the different parts of the conducting system. The first is the sinoatrial node, the second is the atrioventricular node, the third is the bundle of His, fourth are the bundle branches, and finally there are the Purkinje fibers which run all along the ventricles. Now it is important to note that these structures are a part of the heart tissue as well, and these are specialized to perform this function of conduction. A little bit on the sinoatrial node. The sinoatrial node is the dominant part of the conducting system, and it initiates and maintains the rhythm of the heart. It is also known as the pacemaker of the heart. Now the other parts of the conducting system can also generate an action potential, but are much slower than the sinoatrial node. The speed at which the sinoatrial node initiates the action potential is 60 to 100 beats per minute, which is equal to the speed at which the heart beats in 1 minute. Hence, in a normal individual, the heart rate is equal to the rate at which the sinoatrial node generates and conducts the signals. And this concept is very frequently tested in your exams. Another key question that arises is, if the sinoatrial node is unable to function, what happens to the functioning of the heart and the heart rate? Now the heart has several adaptive features to maintain the functioning of the heart, and when this happens, the AV node replaces the sinoatrial node as the dominant pacemaker of the heart. Now the AV node or the atrioventricular node has the ability to generate signals at a much slower pace of 40 to 60 beats per minute. If both the sinoatrial node and the atrioventricular node fail at generating signals, the other parts of the conducting system, like the bundle of His, the bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers, can generate signals at a pace of 25 to 40 beats per minute. In the next couple of sections, we'll be learning about the physiology of the heart. The first concept is that of the cardiac cycle, and this is a very important topic that has been frequently tested in your exams. The cardiac cycle is a sequential event in the heart which is cyclically repeated, and it consists of systole and diastole of the atria and the ventricles. Now, during a normal heartbeat, there are two steps that occur. The first is the contraction of the musculature, which is immediately followed by its relaxation. And as we progress, this contraction is referred to as systole and the relaxation is referred to as diastole. So the easiest way that I remembered this is that systole can be equated to sitting, a process which requires the contraction of musculature, and diastole can be equated to lying down, a process which leads to complete relaxation of the musculature. Now there are 4 steps that are seen in the cardiac cycle. The first is the atrial systole. The signal for the atrial systole is generated by the sinoatrial node, or the SAN, and this is the first step in the atrial systole. Once the signal passes from the sinoatrial node to the atrioventricular node, this will then pass the signal on to the bundle of His, the bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers. The ventricles will start contracting in a second step known as the ventricular systole. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, the contraction or the systole is immediately followed by relaxation, which is known as diastole, and this leads to the final step, which is known as joint diastole, which consists of both the atrial diastole and the ventricular diastole. So atrial systole, just to run through the section, the sinoatrial node generates an action potential which leads to the contraction of the atria. This will lead to an increase in the flow of blood to the ventricles by 30%. Now the last point is especially important to note, because even when the atria are not contracting or undergoing systole, the blood flows into the ventricles due to pressure changes, which we will be explaining in the next section. Okay, so the second step is the ventricular systole. This step is especially important as it integrates a portion of physics, which is something that the examiners tend to test a lot. So once the action potential reaches the atrioventricular node, it is then transmitted to the bundle of His, the bundle of branches, and the Purkinje fibers, leading to the contraction of the ventricles. Now just to picturize this one, the ventricular systole is associated with some interesting events which occur due to pressure changes inside the ventricle. First, it is important to define what pressure is. So pressure is defined as force by area, and this means that pressure is directly proportional to force and inversely proportional to the area. The second concept is that blood always flows from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure. Now these two concepts are very important to understand the cardiac cycle, and let's apply these two concepts to the cardiac cycle. Once the ventricles start contracting, the pressure inside the ventricle increases. This increase in pressure is attributed to two things. One is the force on the ventricles increases. Second, the process of contraction leads to the shortening of the muscle fibers, leading to a decrease in area, and this will lead to an increase in the pressure inside the ventricles. Now, as the pressure inside the ventricles continues to increase, it reaches a certain point where the pressure in the ventricles is greater than the pressure in the atria. So according to this, it would eventually lead to blood moving from the ventricles to the atria according to the concept that blood always flows from the region of high pressure to low pressure. This is prevented by the closure of the atrioventricular valves, which consist of the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves, thereby preventing a backflow of blood from occurring in the ventricles. Now, this closure of valves, which will lead to the production of the first heart sound, which is known as S1. Now, just to run through all the text, the in the ventricular systole, the action potential reaches the atrioventricular node. This potential is then transmitted to the bundle of His and the bundle branches, and finally the ventricles begin to contract. This increase in pressure, this leads to an increase in the pressure inside the ventricles, which will lead to the closure of tricuspid and the bicuspid valves. Further increase in pressure or isovolumetric contraction will lead to the opening of the semilunar valves. So just to picturize this statement, once the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves are closed, the ventricles are immediately transformed into a closed chamber. Now there is a small period where the ventricles continue to contract as a closed chamber, and in this phase there is no flow of blood into or out of the ventricle. Now this small period of time where there is no change in the volume of the blood inside the ventricles and the ventricles continue to contract is known as isovolumetric contraction. Finally, during all this while, the pressure inside the ventricles continue to build, and finally it reaches a point where the pressure inside the ventricles is greater than that of the pulmonary artery or the aorta. This will lead to the opening of the semilunar valves, facilitating the movement of blood from a region of higher pressure to a region of lower pressure. The final step in the cardiac cycle is the ventricular diastole. So after contraction, the heart musculature relaxes and tends to regain its original shape in preparation for the next cardiac cycle. As this occurs, there is an increase in the area of inside the ventricles, leading to a decrease in the pressure. So just to picturize this, if this is the ventricles, during the process of the ventricular diastole, there will be an increase in the area, leading to a decrease in the pressure inside the ventricle. Now this decrease in pressure will reach a certain point where the pressure inside the pulmonary artery and the aorta will be greater than that inside the ventricles, and to prevent the backflow of blood from occurring, there is the closure of the semilunar valves which occur, producing the second heart sound or S2. Now, just to get rid of everything, with the closure of the semilunar valves, the ventricles are again transformed into a closed chamber, and the relaxation occurs with no change in volume. So again, there is a transformation into a closed chamber with a relaxation and no change in volume, which leads to something known as isovolumetric relaxation. Finally, the pressure in the atria will the pressure in the ventricles will drop to such an extent that the pressure in the atria is greater than that inside the ventricles, and to again regain the flow of blood, there is an opening of the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves. Here is a diagram to represent the cardiac cycle as a function of time. Here you can note that the duration of the cardiac cycle is 0.8 seconds. The atrial systole occurs for a duration of 0.1 second. The second step would be the ventricular systole, which occurs for a duration of 0.3 seconds, in which the AV valves close, producing the first heart sound, also known as lub. The next thing would be the ventricular diastole, which occurs for a period of 0.4 seconds, and during which The semilunar valves close, producing the second heart sound known as dub. The next concept is that of cardiac output. So before that, it is important to mention a couple of points. Normal duration of the cardiac cycle is 0.8 seconds. With this, the heart rate can be calculated as follows. If one cycle takes 0.8 seconds to occur, then 72 cycles can occur in 60 seconds or 1 minute, and this will give the heart rate of a person to be 72 beats per minute. So that is the normal duration of the cardiac cycle. The second is that the stroke volume, which is the amount of blood pushed out with each heartbeat, is approximately 70 ml. With this, you can define what a cardiac output is. Cardiac output is the total volume of blood pumped out in 1 minute, and this can be arrived by multiplying the heart rate and the stroke volume. So if heart rate is found to be 72 beats per minute and stroke volume in a normal individual is 70 ml, then you will arrive at a cardiac output of approximately 5000 ml, which is 5 liters per minute. Now the body has the ability to alter both stroke volume and heart rate in the case of exercise via sympathetic stimulation, something that we will be learning about in the next section. The next section deals with the regulation of the cardiac activity. So although the heart is auto-excitable in nature, specific parameters like the heart rate and the stroke volume can be modified via a special regulatory system known as ANS. This ANS consists of sympathetic and parasympathetic signals which reach the heart and modify the heart rate and the stroke volume. So sympathetic and parasympathetic system and its effects on the heart will be discussed in the next section. The sympathetic system acts via specific receptors in the heart. It increases heart rate and force of contraction, thereby increasing the cardiac output. And I think the easiest way to remember the functioning of the sympathetic system is to equate all body feelings that would occur if you imagine a tiger appearing in front of you. And if a tiger appears in front of you, there would be an increase in the heart rate and an increase in the force of contraction, leading to an increase in the cardiac output. The next is the function of the parasympathetic system on the heart. The parasympathetic system acts via a nerve known as the vagus, which is also known as the 10th cranial nerve. It decreases the heart rate by decreasing the speed of conduction of the action potential, thereby decreasing the cardiac output. And I think you can remember the functioning of the parasympathetic system as a system which is opposite to that of the sympathetic system. Moving on to the next section, we will talk about ECG or electrocardiogram. So as mentioned before, the signals generated inside the heart are electrical signals in nature, and these signals can be represented on a graph sheet. So an ECG is basically a graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart. A machine which is used to record this ECG is known as an electrocardiograph, and this point, although counterintuitive, will help with easy memorization. Finally, the machine consists of 12 structures known as leads, which are connected to the different parts of the body, and these leads measure the signals. This here is an illustration of an ideal ECG. The voltage is measured on the y-axis, whereas the time is measured on the x-axis. There are 3 parts to a normal ECG, and memorizing the names of these parts become very important for the exams. The first part is known as the P wave, and this P wave can be equated to the conduction of signals through the atria, resulting in the atrial systole, and hence this is known as the atrial depolarization. The second part is called the QRS complex, and this represents the passage of signals through the ventricles, resulting in the ventricular systole, and this is also known as ventricular depolarization. The last part is the T wave, and this represents the repolarization of the ventricles. So just to go through the text, the P wave represents the atrial depolarization, the QRS complex represents the ventricular depolarization, and the T wave represents the ventricular repolarization. Some important features regarding the ECG. Counting the number of QRS complexes in a given time period will give the heart rate. This point is pretty much self-explanatory, as there is only one QRS complex in each cardiac cycle. We can calculate the duration of each cardiac cycle and then arrive at the heart rate. To give an example, if an ECG shows 3 cardiac cycles, 3 QRS complexes in 3 seconds, then you can conclude that the duration of each cardiac cycle would be 1 second, thereby giving the heart rate to be 60 beats per minute. The next point is that for a given lead, the ECGs obtained from different individuals will give the same shape. Hence, any deviation in this shape indicates a possible abnormality or disease. So just to conclude, the functions of the ECG are to determine the heart rate and to screen for disease. So coming to the last section in physiology, we will talk about the circulation in the body. Now there are 2 systems for circulation in our body, the pulmonary and the systemic circulation. The pulmonary circulation transports blood between the lungs and the heart, and here I've represented the deoxygenated blood in red and the deoxygenated blood in blue and the oxygenated blood in red. So the right ventricles carry the blood into the lung via the pulmonary artery. The lung oxygenates the blood and pushes the blood to the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. The systemic circulation transports the blood between the heart and the rest of the body systems, and here you can see that the left ventricle transports the blood to the rest of the tissue via the aorta. The vena cava collects the deoxygenated blood from the rest of the tissue and transport it to the right atrium. Here it is important to note that the 2 systems are very integrated in nature, and you can see that the right atrium pumps the blood into the right ventricle, whereas the left atrium pumps blood into the left ventricle. So this diagram here represents the pulmonary and the systemic circulation in our body. From the right side of the heart, the deoxygenated blood moves into the lung via the pulmonary artery. Lung oxygenates the blood and transports it to the left side of the heart via the pulmonary vein. The left side of the heart pumps the blood to the rest of the tissue via the aorta, and the vena cava are important to collect the deoxygenated blood from the tissues and pump it into the left atrium. Now other systems which are important for circulation. The first is the portal system. Blood from abdominal organs like the intestine pass through the portal vein, sinusoids of the liver, and into the hepatic vein before returning to the heart from the inferior vena cava, and this system is known as portal system. The second is the coronary system, where by circulation of blood in the heart vessels that supply the heart musculature. So this coronary system consists of the coronary arteries and the cardiac vein, and it is the system that supplies the blood to the heart musculature. So the circulation throughout the body is done via the blood vessels, and the structure of the blood vessels is important to take a note of. So the blood vessels have 3 layers. The inner layer is known as tunica intima, the middle layer is known as tunica media, and the external layer is known as tunica externa. So just to picturize this, This is the tunica intima, the innermost layer. The middle is the tunica media, and the external is the tunica externa. One very important point to remember is that the tunica media is comparatively thin in the veins as compared to the arteries. In this section, we will be learning about some of the disorders of the circulatory system. The first one being hypertension. So normally the blood exerts a certain pressure on the arteries, and this pressure is equal to 120 by 80 mm of Hg. The 120 here represents the systolic blood pressure, or the blood pressure which is measured in the arteries during the contraction of the ventricles. The 80 represents the diastolic blood pressure, or the blood pressure measured in the arteries during the relaxation of the ventricles. So a person is termed hypertensive if his blood pressure is above 140 by 90 mm of Hg on 2 consecutive times. Now this disorder is especially important because it can predispose to many other heart diseases, and it is very common in the clinical setting to see patients with heart conditions having hypertension. Hypertension can also affect the functioning of other vital structures like the brain, kidney and retina, and can lead to several life-threatening conditions. The second condition that we will discuss today is atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis is the thickening of blood vessels due to deposition of calcium, fat, cholesterol and fibrinous tissue. This is normally seen in the elderly and can occur due to unhealthy dietary habits. So atherosclerosis will result in the narrowing of the vessel lumen, thereby decreasing the blood supply to the organ. So just to picturize this, if there is a blood vessel which is supplying an organ, if there is continuous deposition of fat, calcium and cholesterol, this will lead to narrowing of the vessel lumen, and this will decrease the blood flow to the organ, thereby causing improper functioning of the organ. A special condition to note is the coronary artery disease. Here the coronary vessels are affected, are atherosclerosed, and to recollect, the coronary blood vessels supply blood to the heart, and so coronary artery disease will result in a condition known as angina, which we will discuss in the next section. So here is a diagram to just point out the atherosclerosis. Here you can see the yellow structure over the vessel, and this is the parts of the tissue which have atherosclerosed. The next condition that we will be discussing today is angina pectoris. So as mentioned earlier, the most common cause is atherosclerosis of the coronary arteries in a condition known as coronary artery disease. This will lead to a reduced oxygen to the heart musculature, and a person presenting with angina pectoris will have acute chest pain which radiates to the left arm or jaw. He'll also present with sweating and shortness of breath or gasping of breath. This condition is seen in the middle-aged and elderly, and this condition may progress to the myocardial infarction. Myocardial infarction or heart attack. So when there is complete closure of the coronary arteries, it will lead to complete stoppage of oxygen to the heart. So again, just to picturize this, if there is a blood vessel or the coronary artery supplying the heart musculature, if there is complete closure of the coronary artery, this will lead to complete stoppage of oxygen from entering the heart, thereby leading to necrosis or death of the heart tissue. This is a life-threatening condition and can lead to death if not treated immediately. The treatment for myocardial infarction is a surgical procedure known as angioplasty, where a stent or a balloon is inserted into the coronary arteries to make the coronary arteries open. The last condition that we will discuss today is congestive heart failure, or CHF. This is a condition where the heart fails to pump appropriately and hence is unable to meet the demands of the body. Now, an interesting concept that arises here is that the disease manifests as a lung condition. Now, to picturize this, the heart receives blood from the lungs via the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. In a condition where the heart is unable to pump the blood forwards into the systemic circulation, it will cause blood to accumulate in the pulmonary circulation, and this will result in a condition known as pulmonary congestion. So hence we arrive at the name congestive cardiac failure or congestive heart failure. With this we come to the end of the topic, the circulatory system.